Today's episode comes to you courtesy of my amazing patrons. Once a month, patrons vote on what commander that they'd like to see in an upcoming episode. The commander that gets the most votes wins. And the commander that they chose this month is Asmodeus the Archfiend. Asmodeus is a 6/6 devil god that costs 4 black. He asks if you would draw a card, exile the top card of your library face down instead. And then by paying black, you draw 7 cards. By paying a single black, you return all cards exiled with Asmodeus the Archfiend to their owner's hand, and you lose that much life. So Asmodeus is kind of like a very interesting version of Necropotence, but in the command zone. We aren't drawing cards anymore, we are actually exiling them and then getting access to them from Asmodeus, but for a price. And again, with that price being life, but still, just 1 life for 1 card is not that big of a deal in Commander, especially when we can utilize Asmodeus to get a ton of cards into our hand. I mean, 3 mana for essentially 7 cards? Yeah, that's pretty absurd. Or, okay, maybe I should say 4 mana, but yeah, technically you could just keep storing up more and more cards out in exile, and then just paying that single black mana whenever you want to. And of course, there are actually some sneaky ways around actually losing any life with this commander. So we can draw an absurd amount of cards with no real consequence, and we can do some really powerful things with that. Now, with this commander, I'm going to take you through different tactics to show you how this deck works and how we're going to win with it. Another thing, this is a very budget-friendly deck. Every single card in the deck outside of the commander is less than $1. Also, in the description below, you'll find a link to the list of the cards for this deck, and yeah, with all that said now, let's jump into it. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble. I absolutely love saying that, and now I can again because this card is very much budget again. I think last time I checked it was around 30 cents or so, so welcome back Wayfarer's Bauble. We can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice to go get a basic land card into play, tapped and shuffle our library. In other words, land ramp in any color. But of course, to ramp, we can also utilize some fantastic mana rocks out there like Charcoal Diamond, Mind Stone, Felwar Stone, Arcane Signet, Star Compass, Fractured Power Stone, Liquid Metal Torque, Prismatic Lens, and Everflowing Chalice. Each of these are very efficient and effective in this deck. But we've got 1 card in this deck that stands above the rest, and that's going to be the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Scourge Familiar. Scourge Familiar is a 3/2 Phyrexian imp with flying that costs 4 and a black that says, discard a card, add black. Scourge Familiar is a pretty absurd card, especially when paired with a commander like this one that can draw you an absurd amount of cards. I mean, if you're willing to lose the life, this card can just keep going and going and going. For example, sure, let's assume that you actually need to utilize mana to do this. Yeah, you pay black, and you draw 7 cards, then you pay another black to then get access to those cards and lose 7 life. So those exiled cards come to your hand, and now you've got 7 cards that you can, of course, discard with this. So by discarding 4 of those cards, you get 4 mana, and then you can activate your commander's abilities again. Now, obviously, again, you're going to keep losing life when you do this, but yeah, there are plenty of ways to gain life, and we'll go through some of those here in a bit. But this thing is just absolutely absurd, and it is most definitely the Golden Pig of this deck. That being said, sometimes our life loss is actually a benefit with cards like Profane Transfusion, Soul Conduit, and Magus of the Mirror. Profane Transfusion is a sorcery that says 2 target players exchange life totals. You create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token where X is the difference between those players' life totals. A life swap card like this one is incredible for this kind of a commander because, again, we just have, all the downside going to an opponent essentially, and we get all the upside. So of course we can also use Soul Conduit to do this multiple times, pay 6, tap 2 target players, exchange life totals. And then Magus of the Mirror can also help us out, tap, sacrifice Magus of the Mirror, exchange life totals with target opponent, activates ability only during your upkeep. So this one can be a little bit riskier, but again, keep in mind that we can activate our commander's abilities on other players' turns, so maybe we can just activate our commander to lose a ton of life right before our turn, and then activate this to actually, make someone lose a ton of life. And we go back to a normal life total. So yeah, these cards can be great ways to pad our life total and also to finish opponents off. But of course, we've got plenty of other fantastic ways to gain life with cards like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Synchromancer, and Blood Tithe. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, better known as Gary, is a 2/4 zombie that has, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life for X your devotion to black. You gain life if you life lost this way. Being in a mono black deck, yeah, we can drain our opponents for a lot with this and gain an absurd amount of life. Speaking of absurd, there's Sangromancer, which says, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. So this can just gain us a lot of life throughout the game just by staying in play, whether, it's us taking out our opponent's creatures, or them just actually taking out creatures, or cycling away cards, or discarding cards in other ways. And then Blood Tithe is pretty straightforward. Each opponent loses 3 life, you gain life equal life lost this way, so generally, again, 3 opponents, that's going to be 9 life gained for a 4 mana card. And of course, we're not done gaining life just yet. We've also got cards like Mask of Grizzlebrand, Call the Bloodline, and Trading Post. Mask of Grizzlebrand says, equipped creature has flying and lifelink, and whenever equipped creature dies, you may pay X life for X is its power. If you do, draw X cards. Our commander is a 6/6, so yeah, hitting for 6 damage in the air is going to be very impactful, again, especially when it gains us 6 life each time, and when our commander does die, and we'll talk about ways to actually ensure that that does happen, we can draw even more cards with this. Moving on, Call the Bloodline has pay 1, discard a card, put a 1/1 black vampire knight creature token with lifelink on the battlefield, activate this ability once each turn. With this, we can actually make an army over time, and yeah, again, those vampires do have lifelink to help pad our life total. And then there's Trading Post, which does a lot of things, but one of those things is pay 1, tap, discard a card, you gain 4 life. So we can help utilize some of those cards that our commander is giving us to actually get some life back. Next up, we actually have some sacrifice outlets that can really help us out as well with Disciple of Grizzlebrand, Witch's Oven, and Bubbling Cauldron. Disciple of Grizzlebrand has pay 1, sacrifice a creature, you gain life equal to sacrifice creature's toughness. Now, typically, for most decks out there, you don't actually want to get rid of your commander, but with this deck, well, there's going to be plenty of times when we do. Like I mentioned earlier, there are ways to get around our commander's downside of losing life. For example, say that we activate our commander's first ability by paying black to draw 7 cards, and we put that on the stack. Before that can resolve, we pay 1, sacrifice our commander, and we gain 6 life. Then that ability on the stack is going to resolve, and we just draw 7 cards. Again, our commander's not around to put them into exile, so we don't actually have to, pay and lose life to get them. And of course, keep in mind, mana dependent, we can do this more than one time, so we can put, 7 cards on the stack a couple of times, and again, not have a downside for it. Outside of losing our commander, but we've got plenty of ways to get our commander back, and we'll talk about those here in a bit. Regardless, another sacrifice outlet we can utilize is Witch's Oven. Tap, sacrifice a creature, create a food token, and the sacrifice creature's toughness is 4 or greater, create 2 food tokens instead. And then Bubbling Cauldron has pay 1, tap, sacrifice a creature, you gain 4 life. Regardless of which of these we're utilizing, they are great ways to get around life loss, and also to even gain us life too. But of course, we've got other ways to sacrifice our commander as well with cards like Carrion Feeder, Viscera and Woe Strider. Carrion Feeder is a 1/1 that can't block, but we can sacrifice a creature with it to put a +1 counter on it. So this can actually grow quite a bit throughout the game if we sacrifice enough creatures. But then Viscera and Woe Strider can provide us value in different ways. They each have sacrifice a creature, scry 1. So again, free sacrifice outlets are fantastic, and yeah, some extra card selection is never a bad thing. Oh yeah, and on top of that, Woe Strider enters the battlefield with a 0/1 goat creature token, so that's nice. Moving on, we've got Dimir Houseguard, which is a 2/3 with fear that has sacrifice a creature, regenerate Dimir Houseguard, and on top of that, we can actually just transmute it from our hand if we want to go get something that's got converted mana cost of 4. Next up, Soldaviana can be incredible with our commander. It has tap, sacrifice a black or artifact creature, add an amount of black equal to the sacrifice creature's mana value. So we can sacrifice our commander to add 6 mana to our mana pool. And then Calling Dais has tap, sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on Calling Dais, pay 1, sacrifice Calling Dais, draw a card for each charge counter on it. So this one can build up a lot of charge counters throughout the game for a ton of value. Or, we can get some immediate value with cards like Village Rites, Altar's Reap, and Costly Plunder. Each of them are going to have a sacrifice a creature, or with Costly Plunder, we can actually sacrifice an artifact to draw 2 cards. In a similar way, we've got Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain, and Plumb the Forbidden. Deadly Dispute's going to have a sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. Whereas Reckoner's Bargain's going to have us gain life equal to sacrifice permanent's mana value, and we draw 2 cards. So yeah, life gain with that with our commander can be great. On the other hand, we've got Plumb the Forbidden, which is life lost, but still in a fantastic way. As initial cost to cast a spell, we can sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When we do, we copy the spell for each creature sacrificed this way. We draw a card and we lose 1 life. So with this, we can actually mass sacrifice a lot of things to draw a ton of cards if we need to. That being said, of course, sacrificing our commander is not the end for it, because we've got plenty of ways to get it back with cards like Zombify, Dread Return, and Victimize. Zombify is a very simple and straightforward card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then Dread Return does the exact same thing, but we can also flash it back by sacrificing 3 creatures. But then there's Victimize, which says choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen card to the battlefield tapped. So for the cost of 1 creature going away, we can get 2 creatures back at a low cost. But of course, we're not done just yet because we also have Beacon of Unrest, Unbreakable Bond, and Infernal Offering. Beacon of Unrest says put target artifact or creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control, shuffle Beacon of Unrest into its owner's library. So this one can actually get us back a lot of things, including things from our opponent's graveyard, so keep that in mind. And then Unbreakable Bond is up next, says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. Again, our commander is a 6/6, so that's a decent amount of damage, and yeah, gaining life can be very impactful for us. And Infernal Offering says choose an opponent, you and that player each sacrifice a creature. Each player sacrifice a creature this way draws 2 cards. And choose an opponent, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then that player returns a creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. So this one can provide some additional value, and we can actually politic with this one as well. Next up, a repeatable effect to get our commander back though comes with Strands of Night. It has pay black, pay 2 life, sacrifice a swamp, return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That is a small price to pay to be able to get our commander back again and again and again. And then Rescue from the Underworld can really help us out in the pinch. It's instant speed and it says extra cost to cast it, sacrifice a creature. So we can actually utilize this to get rid of our commander, but of course it's going to bring our commander back as well with something else. Speaking of which, there's Voyager Staff, which has pay 2 and sacrifice it, exile target creature, return that creature to play under its owner's control at end of turn. So with this one, we don't actually have to sacrifice our commander to get it out of there while we are waiting to draw our cards without that life loss. But of course, when our commander is in play and we don't want our commander dealt with, well, before we deal with it, we want to utilize some cards like Swiftfoot Boots, Mask of Avacyn, and Mirror Shield to protect it. Each of these do a variety of things, but the most important thing is that they are equipment that give our commander hexproof. So while we can target our commander, our opponents cannot. But of course, let's talk about some ways to wipe out our opponents, outside of actually swapping life totals with them, or maybe even, in combination with those things, with things like Psychosis Crawler, Faith of the Devoted, and Feast of Sanity. When set up properly, Psychosis Crawler is incredibly deadly with this commander. It says whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. Now, keep in mind again, our commander replaces our draws, but also keep in mind again that, if we actually utilize those ways to sacrifice our commander to get around our commander exiling cards, we can drain our opponents in no time with this. Speaking of which, Faith of the Devoted says, whenever you cycle or discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. With this card, having no maximum hand size is a very good thing, and yeah, 1 life to drain each of our opponents for 2, and gain 2 is huge. Next up, Feast of Sanity is actually a free effect that can help us out as well, though it says, whenever you discard a card, Feast of Sanity deals 1 damage to any target, and you gain 1 life. With the amount of cards that we can draw, again, we can discard a ton and dish out a ton of pain with this, while also getting our life total back up. Or we can utilize those cards with a card like Zombie Infestation. It says discard 2 cards, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this can help us make a massive zombie army out of nowhere. And speaking of a massive zombie army, how about Grimoire of the Dead? It has pay 1, tap, discard a card, put a study counter on Grimoire of the Dead. And then by tapping and remove 3 of those counters from it, we sacrifice it and get all creature cards from all graveyards into play under our control, and they're zombies, so have fun with that. But finally, now let's talk about some ways to throw wrenches into our opponent's plans with cards like Feed the Swarm, Corrupt, and Unstable Obelisk. Feed the Swarm is going to destroy target creature or enchantment, and we lose life with that permanent's mana value. But then Corrupt is going to deal damage equal to the number of swamps we control a target creature or player, and we gain life equal to damage dealt this way. And then Unstable Obelisk is actually a mana rock that can tap for a colorless, or we can pay 7 to tap and sacrifice to destroy target permanent. So this card can definitely help us out a lot throughout the game in one way or another. Moving on though, there's Meteor Golem, which when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. And then Introduction to Annihilation says, exile target non-land permanent, its controller draws a card. Whereas Scour from Existence just says, exile target permanent. Yeah, mono black can have a hard time dealing with certain types of permanents, so these can come in huge. We've also got ways to deal with a lot of things at once with cards like Hex and Languish. Hex is going to destroy 6 target creatures, and Languish is going to give all creatures -4/-4 until end of turn, and of course our commander can survive that. We've also got some other ways to wipe out a lot of things with cards like Nevinyrral's Disc and Oblivion Stone. Nevinyrral's Disc enters the battlefield tapped, we can pay 1 to tap and destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So this can be a great panic button for us if we need it. Or, yeah, even a way to take out our commander if we need to as well. Speaking of which, there's Oblivion Stone, which has pay 4, tap, put a fate counter on target permanent, and by paying 5 and tapping and sacrificing it, we get rid of everything that doesn't have a fate counter on it. So again, a great panic button in a lot of situations. But now that we've talked about every single 9-land card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Like I mentioned at the start of this episode, every single card in this deck outside the commander is less than $1. So as you can see with this deck, we've got an estimated cost of $30.50. And keep in mind that cost actually includes basic lands at 10 cents a piece, so if you already have those basic lands, well, there's some extra savings there for you. And speaking of extra savings, you might be able to save even more by buying this deck on TCG Player and utilizing heavily played and damaged cards, which of course need a home as well. Though, do keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.